How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So today we're going to be talking about your book and Told My Story Anyway, which is a beautiful literary analysis of the influential works of foundational Black women writers in the context of South Africa. And I love the way that you argued for fiction to be made into theory, to be read as theory, and to be read as a critique, a social critique of the systems that are at play around us. So I just wanted to ask, when did you conceive of the project? What motivated it? And how long did it take to complete it?
Thank you. Thanks for your comments about the text. Well, this was a long project. I conceived of it as a PhD student. Actually, before I did my PhD, I wrote a proposal to go and study, and it was part of my proposal. So the idea simply came from the fact that when I was a master's student, which is now decades ago at UWC, I was really interested in Black women's writing, and I discovered the writing of Miriam Tladi and Loretta Ngobo, for example. But it dawned upon me then that I hadn't really encountered them before as a student or even in school, which made sense because I grew up under apartheid, so we wouldn't have read anything like the work that they produced. And so I was always searching for sources and secondary essays and just writing criticism on these writers, but wasn't finding very much. And then I decided, well, why don't I write this up as my own research? And that's when it became my PhD work. And so my research that I did for my PhD, and it was a dissertation. It took many years. Probably about 5 years to write as a dissertation, and then maybe another 5 years to convert it into a book. No, I'm lying. It was much longer than 5 years. But yeah, that's what it was. My wanting to read something that I couldn't find in the libraries really propelled me to write the book that I wanted to read, as Toni Morrison says.
I think you included some really amazing works that most of which I have not come across and I have not had the pleasure of reading. And I know that a lot of these books are out of print, which is a shame. But I mean, considering that, did you face any challenges in picking the books that you analyzed, and why did you pick those books in particular for this study?
Right, thank you. So the book looks at 10 women, Black women, South African writers, and or with ties to South Africa, because they weren't all based in South Africa when they were writing their books, like Bessie Head and Loretta Ngobo and Yvette Christianse, for example, and Zoe Wickham. But really, the books, the challenge, there were multiple challenges about deciding which texts to use. Because I was doing my PhD in the USA, ironically, it's easier to find these texts in the USA than in South Africa. So, for example, Miriam Tladi's books I could buy on eBay. I found them, they were very expensive, but they were still available to me after I saved some money to buy them. Whereas in South Africa, it is virtually impossible to find anything by Miriam Tladi, especially her first novel, Muriel at Metropolitan. It's completely out of print. So there was that question of access to the documents. And I think in the USA, it's just much easier to find resources. And if you're at a well-resourced institution, as I was, you can access libraries and interlibrary library loan and so on. The other part of that question, or the other answer to that question, is how did I select? Because when I extended the book from the dissertation. Of course, a book that flows out of a dissertation is a very different product. You don't submit the whole manuscript that you submitted for your PhD. Then I decided to expand the section, and I added the last writers, the last 5 writers, Zukiswa Warner, Kagiso Lesego Molope, Yvette Christian, Sarada Jacobs. They weren't part of my dissertation. And Farida Karodia also, and Agnes Sam. And so what I wanted to do was a more thorough history of Black women's literary production in South Africa in English. And so I thought I want to make it a more substantive book. And I wanted to expand on what I'd done in my dissertation. And so to choose then, at the time when I started the project, there were not that many Black women writing novels or Black women published novels in English in South Africa. But by the time I'd come to the finish line, there'd been this explosion of literary works. So you'll find like Angela Makolwa and Sue Nyati, the many, many more Black women novelists. And so by the end of it, when I was writing the final chapter, the challenge was really, what do I include and at the expense of what am I excluding? And I really think there's a second book waiting to be written, because after the 2000s, maybe the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006, there's really like an amazing explosion of literary works. And it's Black women are leading that movement of literary production. And it's a very exciting space. And I wish that I could have included more in my book, but I had to finish the book in order for it to be published, or I'd still be sitting here writing.
You said that you started working on this project when you were in the US, and you mentioned a lot of writers, a lot of Black women writers from South Africa who, in your book, who wrote from outside the country. So there's a bit of a parallel there. What was your experience writing about South Africa from the outside looking in? Did that affect how you wrote and what you wrote about?
Oh, that's such a great question. Yes. Of course, what was such a luxury for me, I was an older PhD student. I was 30 when I started my PhD, and my peers in my cohort were all 22. What was such a luxury for me was the time and the space to devote solely to reading, thinking, and writing. Previously in South Africa, I had been a student, but I'd been working. I was a mother. I was married. I had a lot of roles, and that university where I was, it really gave me the space to focus on intellectual pursuits and to really dream big in terms of my vision and what I wanted to accomplish with my PhD. And it was such an incredible gift. And of course, I had, for the first time in my life, I think, the space to reflect about where I came from, about South Africa, and about the unique challenges that we face as South African and Black South African women and Black South African creators who want to produce something of worth and share it with the world. And so the first thing was a lot of homesickness, extreme homesickness, and then having to build communities, feminist communities in a different country, which I did. And the community really pulled me through that phase of my life of writing. But also, the distance allowed me just to see and think and conceive of South Africa differently. It also made me think a lot about my privilege and what it meant to be, as a Black woman, a Black South African woman, actually have the space and time just to think. And I think I experienced a lot of almost wanting to be in South Africa in order to be part of women's movements and some of the developments that were happening in the country. Like, for example, during this Jacob Zuma rape trial, I was in the USA, and I wasn't really part of. I thought I would have done a lot more activism at that time had I been in South Africa. But the result was for me that I could see home differently, and perhaps also identify to an extent, even though I wasn't in exile, someone like Bessie Head, someone like Loretta Ngobo, or and Yvette Christianse, who I met while I was there and worked with. Just how distance gives us a new perspective and gives us a space to actually be able to reflect, see the country differently, see politics and gender politics within the country quite differently. It was a real gift.
I mean, I think, you are talking about how you didn't feel like you could have been a part of the activism, but I do think that this work in particular is a piece of activism in itself, because it brings forth the issues that, are not really talked about in the ways that bring voices to the forefront that need to be brought to the forefront.
Could I interject? I think that's an interesting question. I really don't, there is a thing such as literary activism, but I've more and more moved away from describing myself as an activist because I think, and I've learned this from conversations with Tsitsi Dangaremga, for example, that, there are modes of activism and they differ according to what the objective is that we want. And it's really difficult for me at this point of my work to describe myself as an activist, because I think while writing does a particular thing and it does perhaps the work of excavating hidden and suppressed voices, I still don't think really it's activism as such in a way that if you were running a campaign, a political campaign, or putting your body on the line, for example, in the way that certain for-list activists did, for example. I think they're very different modes of engagement with politics.
You talked about building communities, and I noticed that you used quite a few of your own interviews with Yvette Christianse, with Miriam Tlali, with Loretta Ngobo as well in the work. And I was just wondering, what was that like? What was that process like to be interviewing the people whose works you were studying? And I mean, considering the fact that Miriam Tlali in particular and Loretta Ngobo have passed, what does that then feel like to kind of be a bit of a custodian of that information, and how does it feel to contribute to the archive in that way?
Wow, those are weighty questions. I don't consider myself custodians of anything or anyone's legacies. I'm trying to construct a conversation really around their work and show what political interventions their work can make and how their work could be really valuable in this current political moment in South Africa. What I do think it was, again, an immense privilege to be able to meet with them and to be able to engage with them and talk about feminism and talk about writing. These were subjects that were so close to my heart and to their hearts too. And it was just incredible, like a once-in-a-lifetime experience to sit with Miriam Tlali in her own home for many hours and talk. And we corresponded with each other afterwards for a few years. Similarly with Loretta Ngobo, she was so gracious and warm to me, and she allowed me, when I met her in Durban at her house, she actually insisted that I stay over and sleep in a guest bedroom because she didn't want me to go to a hotel. I just feel incredibly privileged to have had those experiences and to have, in that way, I learned from their books a lot. But then to have engaged with them and see their politics in action and how generous they were. And I think that's also what I took away from that to try and really be generous to other scholars. And I mean this in a scholarly way, where now dealing with younger students or mentees, trying to really always do my best just to enable possibilities for people who I'm working with, because there were so many women who did that for me, who opened doors for me, who made my academic work possible. And that's always something that I'm seeking to then enable.
I just want to go back to the writing.
Really long answers that I'm giving.
No, they're perfect. They're actually perfect. I just want to go back to the process of writing, and I know it's an up and down process of constantly learning and producing and learning and producing. But I just wanted to know, did the process change you in any way? What was your biggest takeaway or the biggest lesson that you learned while writing this?
Oh, our biggest one. There's so many, many. The first one probably is just in terms of craft, consistency pays. If you do a little bit of writing every day, you can't go wrong. That's just a technical issue. How to not be afraid of having a voice. That was something I really had to overcome, because I grew up and was socialized in a society and a family that didn't value my voice because I was a woman. And so I had to undo that. I was 34 years old when I started working on my dissertation. And even at that stage, I was not confident in my voice. I wasn't sure that I had anything valuable to contribute. And so the process of writing the book and the dissertation helped me to overcome that particular problem, because I do think I have a valuable contribution to make. Other things that I learned was just the political lessons that the women writers whose work I look at, what they can teach us, their resilience, their utter commitment to freedom. These are lessons that stay with me, because they're so incredibly, they're like light bearers. They hold a torch and they show us the way to be free. And this is probably the most profound impact that doing this work has had on me, that it's made me believe that freedom is possible, and that there are women who showed us how to achieve that.
So in your introduction, I just want to talk about the title of the book for a little bit, because it's so interesting, and I think it's one of my favorite parts about the book itself. So in your introduction, you include an analysis of Tlina Mhlophe's short story, The Toilet. And one of the sentences in that short story has the phrase, "and told my story anyway." So I just wanted to know what led you to this title in particular. Was it a choice made in the process of editing? Did you see the line and say, this is it?
That's a great question. Also, it's the last line in the short story, "and wrote my story anyway." She writes about a young woman who sits in a public toilet and writes her, and then she gets locked out. But then one morning, and then she decides, well, I wrote my story anyway, even though I was locked out of the toilet. The short story is called The Toilet, for anyone who wants to read it. So the title of the book, went up and down between me and the editors at Wits University Press. As a writer, you don't have automatic say in what your title will be. It's something that's negotiated, because the press needs to have it marketable and so on. And they will say, well, this title's boring, or it won't sell, or it needs to be a title that stands out, that people will sit up and look at. And so it probably took about 6 months of back and forth in email and conversations to come up with the title, and it changed many times. And I liked that line. I've taught that story many, many times in feminist literary studies classes and feminist theory classes. And I've always seen the profound impact that it has on some students' consciousness and ideas about structure and agency. It's a great short story to demonstrate what oppressive structures look like and what an individual's agency within those structures can enable. And so anyway, we got to the and wrote my story anyway. And then I think the editor said, we can't have a title that starts with and I said, and why not? So that was another negotiation. But at that point, I said, no, I think this is it, and I'm not changing it. And so that's what we ended up with. The second part of the title, after the colon, that also changed several times. But I really like what that phrase signifies about persistence in the face of oppression.
Thank you. I just wanted to know, there's a lot that you fit into this particular study, and there's a lot of transitions, I think, that you look at in a very nuanced way, because I think you look at shifts in time periods from colonialism to apartheid to post-apartheid, but in also doing that, you managed to look at the shifts in Black female subjectivity, where we go from girlhood to womanhood to motherhood. And I just wanted to know, with all of this information and it coming off and reflecting in a really balanced way, how did you achieve that? Was that a hard process to do? When did you know when enough was enough, when it came to the research that formed the book?
Well, I never came to that point where enough was enough. I reluctantly let go of the book because people, my own mentors and friends, were telling me, you actually need to publish the book because you're making it your life's work, and it's not, you need to let it go and go out in the world so that you can do other things. So I was never satisfied with it and what it achieves in terms of span. I wanted to go another in the post-transitional era. I wanted to go there also, but it couldn't. Because it's a finite product. And so I appreciate your comments about the transitions. It looks mostly at the transition from apartheid to democracy. And then I also use this neo-slave narratives by Black women as a way of thinking about transitions in colonial South Africa, where slavery was abolished, and how those transitions, huge political systems being transformed, what they do to personhood, and how people respond and react to that politically and also individually, which is really the same thing. So I'm glad that one reader finds that it's quite balanced and spans a vast terrain in terms of transition. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I just want to know, you talked about how there's an explosion of new voices and new stories in South Africa, and knowing that, there is still a lot of marginalization that is happening within the country and still a lot of struggle that is going on. What is your hope then for not only fiction, but fiction as a theory-making platform in terms of circulation within schools, within the educational system as well?
That is such an interesting and large question. I hope that fiction and literature in general, and Black literature and Black women's literature and queer women's literature will continue to flourish and proliferate. I think it's really important that we have a diversity of voices represented nationally, globally from this location, because what fiction does, it allows us to dream new possibilities of how the world can be. Um, and I think it is such an important vehicle, as you mentioned, also for teaching. We can do so much with it, with young adult fiction, for example. There is an exciting proliferation of children's books at the moment from Black women, all about bodies and hair and the beauty standards. And every time I see such a book, I'm feeling really sad, because why couldn't that book be around when I was a teenager or a young girl? And I'm so excited to see what is coming out and the way in which literature is being used to build us, to build um, our sense of self that has been robbed from us through colonialism and apartheid, and restore us in a way. I think I just read this weekend a book edited by Natalia Mulabatsi, Wild Imperfections. It's poetry, womanist poetry from around the globe. But when I finished reading the book, what I felt was I had been restored to myself. I had started the weekend feeling very tired, and I had a very difficult week, and I had a lot of difficulties. And I read this book, and it did something to me which allowed me to continue. And I call that restoration. And I think a lot of literature that is produced now from the so-called margins, people whose voices were excluded historically, those kinds of works have the ability to restore us and heal us. And I think that's very important.